Monica trusted her sister Lena with everything, her secrets, her friendship, even her husband Eric. But behind Monica's back, Lena seduced Eric, turning a forbidden affair into a deadly conspiracy that would shatter their family and end in a cold-blooded betrayal no one saw coming. Monica had always been the dependable sister, the one who showed up early, cleaned up after everyone, and never raised her voice. She lived a simple life with her husband Eric in a quiet suburb in Oregon. Their home was small but cozy, filled with framed photos, scented candles, and neatly folded blankets on every chair. To their neighbors, Monica and Eric were the perfect couple. Married for 8 years, they rarely argued, and Monica always spoke kindly of her husband. Eric was the kind of man who mowed the lawn every Sunday, helped carry groceries, and kissed his wife goodbye each morning. No one suspected anything was wrong. Lena was the complete opposite of Monica. Younger by 5 years, she had always been the wild one. She never stayed in one place, never kept a job for long, and her relationships ended in chaos. She had an energy that pulled people in and a confidence that sometimes came across as arrogance. After a breakup with a man she had moved across the country for, Lena packed 2 suitcases and arrived at Monica's doorstep with a forced smile and tired eyes. She didn't ask for permission, she simply said she had nowhere else to go. Monica welcomed her with open arms. She gave her the guest room, offered her home-cooked meals, and even helped Lena apply for new jobs. Eric was polite, but his smile was thinner than usual. He had always found Lena overwhelming, but he respected Monica's decision. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. Lena stayed quiet, mostly kept to herself, and helped around the house. But it didn't last. Soon, Lena's presence began to shift the energy in the home. She walked around in shorts that barely covered her, borrowed Monica's makeup without asking, and stayed up late watching loud TV shows. Monica didn't notice. She was too busy managing work deadlines, cooking dinner, and keeping the peace. But Eric noticed everything. He noticed the way Lena smiled too long, the way her perfume lingered in the kitchen, and how she laughed at jokes that weren't even funny. Lena started spending more time with Eric. She asked him for help with her resume, then asked for advice on where to shop for groceries, then started watching movies with him after Monica went to bed. At first, Eric tried to avoid her. He left the room when she entered, answered her questions with short replies, and stayed close to Monica whenever he could. But Lena was persistent. She made compliments sound innocent, her touches seem accidental, and her attention seem harmless. Eric began to let his guard down. Monica was completely unaware. She trusted them both. To her, Lena was family and Eric was loyal. She focused on her routine, waking up early, making breakfast, checking her planner, and rushing out the door for work. She had no reason to doubt either of them. She believed love was enough, but Lena had come with a plan. She hadn't just left her ex-boyfriend. She had been thrown out. The relationship had ended violently, and Lena had nowhere to go. She remembered the last time she visited Monica, how happy she had looked, how safe her life seemed. Lena had always envied her sister not just for her stability, but for her husband. Eric was everything Lena had never had in a man: kind, patient, and successful. During her last visit 2 years ago, Lena had caught him staring at her just once, and that was all it took to convince her that he was vulnerable. Now, living under the same roof, Lena studied him. She watched what made him laugh, what irritated him, and when Monica wasn't around, she turned on her charm. She wore dresses she hadn't worn in years, cooked meals Monica didn't know how to make, and complimented Eric more than Monica ever did. At first, Eric dismissed it. Then he started enjoying it. He stayed up later. He smiled at her jokes. He started waiting for those moments when Monica wasn't in the room. It wasn't an affair yet, but the atmosphere had changed. Eric stopped kissing Monica goodbye. He spent more time on his phone. He looked distracted, nervous, sometimes cold. Monica chalked it up to stress. She started putting more effort into their marriage, making his favorite meals, planning a weekend getaway, being more affectionate. But Eric's mind was elsewhere, and Lena knew it. Lena began writing in a journal. She documented everything: how many minutes Eric stayed to talk, what he wore, how he reacted to her compliments. She treated it like a science project. Every detail mattered. She had done this before, manipulated men, gotten what she wanted. But this time, it wasn't about money or fun. It was about beating Monica. Lena had spent her whole life being compared to her older sister. Now, She wanted to take something that belonged to her, something that would hurt. The first time Lena touched Eric's hand, it lasted only a second too long. The second time, she brushed against his arm in the kitchen. The third time, she leaned in a little too close while laughing. Eric didn't pull away. He didn't stop her. Lena could feel it. He was folding. Monica came home one evening with takeout. Lena was sitting beside Eric on the couch, her legs tucked under her, laughing. Eric looked startled when Monica walked in. She didn't think anything of it. She placed the food on the table and kissed Eric on the cheek. He barely responded. That night, Lena wrote 4 pages in her journal. She titled them Progress. By the end of the week, she would kiss him, and she knew he would let her. And once that happened, nothing would ever be the same again. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon when Monica was called away for a last-minute work trip. Her manager had arranged an important client meeting in Seattle, and she needed to leave the same evening. She kissed Eric goodbye, gave Lena a hug, and left without a clue of what would unfold in her absence. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, the silence in the house shifted. Lena stood in the doorway, watching the rain, while Eric pretended to be focused on his laptop. But they both felt it freedom. For Lena, it was an opening. For Eric, it was a test. Lena didn't act immediately. She waited, letting the silence build. She made tea, offered Eric a cup, and sat across from him at the kitchen table. She didn't push too hard, just asked about his day and laughed at everything he said. Slowly, the space between them shrank. By the evening, they were sitting side by side on the couch, watching a movie neither of them paid attention to. Lena shifted her weight closer, brushing her shoulder against his. He didn't move away. When the movie ended, Eric turned to say goodnight. Lena leaned in and kissed him before he could say a word. It was quick but deliberate. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Eric stood frozen, torn between guilt and desire. Then he walked away without saying anything, disappearing into the bedroom he shared with Monica. Lena didn't follow. She just smiled to herself and went to her room. The next morning was filled with tension. Eric avoided eye contact. He left the house early, claiming he had work at the office. Lena acted normal, even cheerful. She cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and acted as if nothing had happened. But inside, she was celebrating. She had crossed the line and nothing had stopped her. Eric didn't confront her, didn't tell Monica, didn't leave the house. That was enough for Lena to know he wouldn't resist for long. Over the next few days, Lena reeled him in further. She made his favorite breakfast. She started sitting on the porch when she knew he'd come home from work, waiting with a drink in hand. She made herself impossible to ignore. Eric tried to create distance, but Lena knew exactly how to pull him back in. Every glance, every word, every small gesture was carefully calculated. When she complimented his shirt, she didn't stop at the color. She mentioned how it brought out his eyes. When she touched his arm, she didn't pull back immediately. She let it linger just long enough to make him think. Eric gave in slowly. At first, it was only moments, a hand on her back, a smile that lasted too long, a conversation that drifted into personal territory. Then, one evening, he stayed up late while Lena watched another movie. This time, she sat closer. When their hands touched, he didn't pull away. When she leaned her head on his shoulder, he let her stay. The silence between them grew heavier, but neither said a word. The boundaries had already broken. On Sunday, Monica returned home, cheerful and exhausted. She brought gifts, hugged Eric, and thanked Lena for holding down the house. Everything seemed normal. Lena acted sweet, even helpful, and Eric played the part of a loving husband. Monica never noticed the flickers in their eyes, the awkward pauses, the tension hidden beneath smiles. But the affair had begun. It didn't stop with one kiss. Over the next few weeks, it evolved into stolen touches, whispered promises, and moments hidden behind closed doors. Eric lived in guilt, but the thrill outweighed his conscience. Lena knew how to keep him close and how to manipulate his emotions. She told him how unhappy Monica seemed, how misunderstood he was, how better things could be. Eric began to believe her. He stopped caring about Monica's affection. Her efforts to make things better went unnoticed. She would cook elaborate meals, only for Eric to eat in silence. She'd try to make plans, but he always had excuses. Lena watched it all unfold with satisfaction. She didn't just want Eric's love. She wanted Monica's life to crumble from the inside out. To maintain control, Lena kept documenting everything in her journal. She wrote down every encounter, every reaction, and every detail of how Eric responded. Her obsession with control grew darker. She even began noting Monica's work schedule, her routines, and how often she left the house. It wasn't just about seduction anymore. It was about power. Eric, meanwhile, was losing sleep. He felt torn between guilt and desire. At night, he lay beside Monica, pretending to sleep while Lena's perfume lingered in his memory. He started drinking more, staying longer at work, and avoiding eye contact at dinner. Monica, confused by the sudden changes, chalked it up to stress. She tried to reconnect, but the man she loved was slipping away and she didn't know why. Lena pushed further. She began talking about a future with Eric, hinting at possibilities if Monica were no longer around. Eric didn't respond, but he didn't shut her down either. Lena took his silence as agreement. She began to imagine a life where Monica was gone, and she had everything. But behind her confidence, Lena didn't see the cracks forming. She underestimated Monica's awareness. She underestimated how quiet people could still see the truth without saying a word. And most of all, she underestimated that the affair, no matter how hidden, would leave behind signs. While Lena believed she was winning, she didn't realize the game had just begun to turn. The house remained calm on the surface, but beneath it, the foundations were shaking, and soon, everything Lena had built would start to fall apart. Monica had spent the last few weeks wrapped in confusion. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't explain it. Her marriage, once warm and full of little gestures, had grown cold and mechanical. Eric no longer looked at her the same way. His kisses felt distant. He rarely touched her anymore. When she asked questions, he gave vague answers. When she made plans, he always seemed busy. At first, she thought it was stress from work or maybe personal struggles he hadn't shared. But deep down, a quiet voice had begun to whisper something much worse. She tried to brush the thoughts away. She reminded herself that marriages went through phases. She pushed through her days, smiling when she needed to, laughing when expected, and ignoring the knots twisting tighter in her stomach each night. But the small signs became harder to overlook. Her perfume bottle moved from its usual place. A bra she didn't remember wearing showed up at the bottom of the laundry pile. Lipstick she hadn't used in weeks was smeared on a mug in the sink. Monica wasn't the kind of woman to jump to conclusions, but these weren't coincidences. One afternoon, while Eric was at work and Lena had gone out shopping, Monica decided to clean Lena's room. It wasn't meant to be an investigation at first, just a way to keep herself busy. But as she folded some clothes, her hand brushed against something hard under a pile of shirts. She reached in and pulled out a worn leather-bound journal. The cover had no name, but the pages inside were unmistakably Lena's handwriting. At first, Monica hesitated, unsure if she should read what clearly wasn't hers. But curiosity and suspicion outweighed her guilt. She flipped through the first few pages and her heart began to race. What she found wasn't poetry or notes, it was documentation. Detailed entries of conversations, meals, private moments with Eric. Some passages were filled with fantasies of a life without Monica. Others described real encounters, including the first kiss, late-night confessions, and the steady unraveling of Monica's marriage. Lena wrote about how easy it was to manipulate Eric, how predictable Monica had become, and how satisfying it was to finally take what her sister had always had. Monica sat on the bed, journal in her lap, her hands trembling. Her chest tightened with every word. She flipped through dozens of entries, each one more cruel than the last. Lena hadn't just fallen into an affair, she had orchestrated it. And Eric hadn't resisted. He had embraced it. Monica didn't cry. She didn't scream. She closed the journal slowly, put it back where she found it, and left the room in silence. Her mind was spinning, but her face remained calm. Something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt confused or heartbroken. She felt focused. She couldn't confront them, not yet. She needed more than rage. She needed evidence, control, and time to think. Monica began writing her own notes. She documented every interaction with Lena and Eric. She recorded what time they left and returned, how they looked at each other, how they behaved when they thought she wasn't paying attention. She downloaded a voice recording app and started placing her phone in rooms before leaving. She didn't say anything to anyone. She just watched, listened, and waited. At the same time, an unlikely observer was watching as well. Mrs. Riley, Monica's next-door neighbor, was a widow in her 70s who spent most of her time tending her garden and drinking tea by the window. She had known Monica and Eric for years and had always admired Monica's gentle nature. But she had never liked Lena. From the day Lena arrived, Mrs. Riley noticed strange changes in the house. She saw Eric leaving late at night and Lena walking barefoot in the backyard in the early morning. Sometimes Lena stood too close to Eric. Sometimes Eric stared at her longer than he should have. Mrs. Riley didn't say anything until one day. She overheard a conversation through her open kitchen window. Eric and Lena were talking on the porch. Their words were hushed, but their tone was unmistakable. Lena was saying things about Monica, things that made Mrs. Riley's blood run cold. She heard Lena mention how Monica would never see it coming. She heard Eric ask if she was sure. And then she heard silence. Disturbed, Mrs. Riley wrote down everything she heard. The next night, she placed a small recording device by the fence that separated the two houses. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she trusted her instincts. Within days, she had captured a full conversation where Lena and Eric discussed Monica's life insurance, potential accidents, and what they could do if she weren't around anymore. Mrs. Riley knew she had to act. She contacted the police and handed over the recordings. The officers took her seriously. They opened a quiet investigation and began monitoring the house without alerting anyone. Monica was soon approached by detectives, who confirmed her suspicions and shared the information Mrs. Riley had collected. Monica cooperated completely. She allowed surveillance in the home. Hidden cameras were placed. Phone calls were tapped. And for weeks, she continued to act like she knew nothing. She smiled, cooked dinner, and kissed her cheating husband on the cheek, even as she watched him betray her behind closed doors. The police gathered more than enough evidence. They recorded discussions between Lena and Eric about sabotaging Monica's car, tampering with her medications, and even staging a break-in gone wrong. Every word was documented, every plan preserved. But the detectives needed one final move, a clear attempt to harm Monica to close the case. They set the trap carefully. Monica was asked to act as usual while detectives monitored every inch of her home. Lena and Eric continued meeting in secret, unaware of the walls closing in around them. Lena started acting more anxious, more aggressive in her push to take the next step. Eric hesitated, but he followed her lead. When the time came, and Lena finally suggested cutting Monica's brake lines, everything they said and did was recorded live. That night, as they walked back into the house, the front door was surrounded by police. Neither of them had time to run. Lena was arrested first, screaming that it wasn't real, that Monica had set them up. Eric stood in silence, his face pale, his hands trembling. Monica watched from the window as her husband was placed in handcuffs. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She just stood there, the calm at the center of the storm. The house was quiet once again, but nothing inside it was the same. The truth had come out, and the people Monica once trusted had been exposed for who they really were. The days following the arrest were quiet, almost too quiet. Monica returned to the house after giving her official statement to the police. The silence inside the walls felt different now. It wasn't the peaceful calm she had once cherished. It was hollow, like the echo of everything that had been taken from her. The scent of betrayal still lingered in every room, on every chair, in every piece of clothing that hadn't been touched. She walked through the house slowly, pausing in the living room where Lena and Eric had spent so many late nights together. She stood in the hallway outside the guest room that Lena had made her own. The air was heavy, and yet Monica's expression remained unreadable. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply sat down at the kitchen table and began writing. Not in a diary or a journal, but on blank sheets of paper, detailing the steps that had led to this moment. It wasn't for the police or the court. It was for herself, a record of the woman she had become when her entire world began to crack. She knew the trial would be long and ugly. She also knew the media would soon catch wind of what had happened. But for now, she had time to breathe, time to reflect, and time to prepare for the final storm. Meanwhile, Lena and Eric were separated in holding cells at the county detention center. Lena had broken first. Her calm and control shattered the moment the cold cuffs locked around her wrists. During the first police interview, she tried to spin the story. She claimed Eric was the mastermind and that she had only gone along with him out of fear. She painted herself as a confused woman pulled into a web she didn't create. But her lies fell apart quickly. The recordings were airtight. The journal, found during the search of her room, was filled with incriminating details. And the surveillance footage captured her exact words, with timestamps and clear intentions. Eric, on the other hand, didn't speak at all during the first few interrogations. He sat with his head down, his face pale, his eyes empty. When asked why he did it, he offered nothing. No excuses, no justification, only silence. The detectives read him every line from Lena's journal. They played him the tapes, one by one, until the weight of it all crushed whatever strength he had left. Eventually, he asked for a lawyer and stopped talking altogether. The community was stunned. The neighbors who once saw Eric mowing the lawn or Monica watering her garden couldn't believe what had happened behind those closed doors. The local paper ran the headline, "Suburban couple at center of murder plot." People whispered in grocery stores, looked over their shoulders, and avoided eye contact when they passed the house. Monica became the subject of curiosity and pity. Some people sent cards, others stayed away. She didn't respond to any of them. The prosecution moved quickly. With solid evidence and clear intent, they were confident in their case. Lena was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. Eric faced similar charges, though the prosecution aimed to show he was less of the architect and more of a willing participant. Still, the betrayal of a spouse carried its own weight in the courtroom. Monica was asked to testify. She agreed, knowing it wouldn't be easy. But she also knew the truth mattered. On the day of the trial, she walked into the courthouse wearing all black. She didn't look at Eric. She didn't glance at Lena. She took the stand and answered every question with clarity. She explained how she discovered the journal, how she found the signs, how she cooperated with law enforcement. She told the jury what she had heard, what she had seen, and what she had lived through. Lena glared at her from the defense table. Eric kept his eyes on the floor. When the tapes were played for the jury, there was no denying the evidence. The conversations were casual but chilling. Lena's voice outlined plans with airy confidence, and Eric's voice responded with weak hesitation that eventually turned into quiet agreement. They spoke of sabotaging Monica's brakes, of making her disappearance look like an accident, of collecting the life insurance within months. There was no remorse in those recordings, only excitement, impatience, and entitlement. The jury took less than a day to reach a verdict. Lena was found guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Eric received a sentence of 15 years, with a recommendation for psychological evaluation. As they were led away in handcuffs, neither of them looked back at Monica. They left the courtroom the same way they had left her life, silently and with nothing left to say. After the trial, Monica didn't return to the house immediately. She stayed at a small cabin on the edge of a nearby lake. The stillness of the water and the isolation gave her the space she needed to think. She brought only a few belongings, including the pages she had written after the arrest. Each night, she read them over, not as a victim, but as a woman who had survived. She didn't understand how Eric could turn on her so easily, or how her own sister could wish her dead. But she also knew that pain didn't always come with explanations. Sometimes it simply arrived and stayed until you learned how to carry it. Back at the house, police had left behind boxes of collected evidence, sealed with labels and dates. Monica didn't open them. She had no interest in reading more of Lena's thoughts or reliving Eric's words. She only took one thing from the evidence pile: her own copy of Lena's journal, not to punish herself, but to remind herself of how far she had come. She placed it in a drawer in the attic, locked it, and left it there. The following week, Monica put the house up for sale. She didn't want to live in a place built on betrayal. She sold most of the furniture, packed only the essentials, and changed her phone number. Friends reached out, but she didn't respond. She needed distance from the past, from the pain, and from the person she used to be. The woman who had once believed in trust, love, and family had been replaced by someone sharper, more cautious, and infinitely stronger. And though she didn't know where she was going next, she knew she would never be the same. In the end, the woman who was supposed to be destroyed walked away with her life. The ones who tried to take it lost everything. And somewhere, far from the house that once held her deepest betrayal, Monica finally exhaled. Months passed, and the story slowly faded from public attention. The house that had once been filled with secrets and lies was sold to a young couple with a baby on the way. They never knew what had happened within its walls, and Monica never looked back. She moved to a different town, far from the courthouse, the whispers, and the memories. She rented a small apartment near the edge of a wooded trail, where mornings were quiet and the air was thick with birdsong. No one knew her name there. That's how she wanted it. Her days became a routine of long walks, quiet meals, and evenings spent reading by the window. The silence that once haunted her now felt like a shield. It protected her from questions, pity, and the weight of her own past. She found a job at a local bookstore, working quietly among the shelves. The owner, a kind woman named Ruth, never asked much about her life, and Monica offered little in return. It was peaceful, detached, and exactly what she needed. But healing doesn't follow a straight path. Some days were harder than others. Occasionally, she would wake from dreams she couldn't remember, but that left her breathless. Sometimes she'd catch the scent of a familiar perfume in a crowd and feel her chest tighten. Once, she saw a man who looked like Eric from behind and froze in place, unable to move for minutes. The scars weren't visible, but they ran deep, woven through every part of her. Despite everything, she didn't allow herself to collapse under the weight of what had happened. She refused to be defined by betrayal. She wasn't just the woman whose husband and sister tried to kill her. She was the one who survived it, watched them fall, and walked away. She carried that truth quietly, like armor. Then one evening, while sorting through a box of old papers she had brought with her from the cabin, she found something she hadn't remembered packing. It was a second journal, hers, not Lena's. But this one wasn't filled with her thoughts or feelings. It was a log, a record of dates, times, behavior, and suspicions. She had started it the day after discovering Lena's journal and kept it updated until the day of the arrest. At first, Monica flipped through the pages with numb detachment. But then she saw something that made her pause. A short entry dated a week before the arrest. It read, "Eric asked if the policy would pay out double if there was no suspect. Lena laughed and said it would." Monica stared at the line. She remembered writing it. What she hadn't realized until now was how casually she had included it, just another piece of the puzzle at the time. The next entry was more cryptic. "Lena thinks she's in control. Eric doesn't know I know everything. Let them feel safe. Let them speak freely. Timing has to be perfect." Monica turned the page, and what followed wasn't just observation, it was strategy. Plans she had made, psychological notes, moments where she had fed them certain lies to gain more evidence. She wasn't just a passive victim. She had played her role with precision. Suddenly, a realization hit her. The journal wasn't just a timeline. It was proof that she had always been one step ahead, not just after discovering the betrayal but before they ever tried to harm her. Her instincts had picked up the truth long before Lena's journal had confirmed it, and that knowledge gave her a strange, powerful sense of closure. But it also raised an uncomfortable question: just how far had she been willing to go to trap them? Some of the entries hinted at manipulation. Notes about saying certain things to make Eric feel more distant from Lena. Mentions of subtle cues she used to increase Lena's jealousy. Monica had never thought of herself as someone who played mind games, but the journal suggested otherwise. In her desperation to survive, she had become something else, something colder, more calculating. She closed the journal and placed it back in the box. Some truths didn't need to be read twice. She had done what she had to do. They had pushed her into a corner, and she had refused to go quietly. Whatever lines she had crossed, they were behind her now. As the months turned into a year, Monica settled further into her new life. The nightmares became less frequent. The tension in her chest eased. The pain dulled. But something inside her remained changed forever. She no longer trusted easily. She watched people more closely. She understood that evil didn't always come from strangers, it often came from the people closest to you. One morning, while reading the local news online, Monica came across an article about Lena. It reported that Lena had been transferred to a different facility after a violent altercation with another inmate. There were no details, just a short paragraph buried near the bottom of the crime section. Monica stared at the screen for a long time, then quietly closed her laptop. She felt nothing, no anger, no relief, just silence. Eric's name came up less and less. His sentence had been shorter, but Monica doubted he would find much peace. His betrayal had cost him more than years. It had stripped him of everything he had once claimed to love. She wondered sometimes if he thought about her, if he regretted his choices. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. He had made his bed. She had walked away from it. One evening, Monica took a walk along the wooded trail near her apartment. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the air smelled of pine and soil. She sat on a bench overlooking a small stream, the same spot she visited every weekend. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting gold across the water, Monica let out a long, quiet breath. She thought about the life she had lost, about the man who betrayed her, the sister who envied her, the plans made in whispers, the moments stolen behind her back. And then she thought about herself, about how she had uncovered the truth, outsmarted them both, and survived what was meant to destroy her. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need apologies. She had something far more powerful. She had the truth, and she was still standing, and that was enough.